Welcome back to the Fused Life podcast, where I host guests with specialized experience and knowledge in the world of back pain. Today's guest is a women's physique and fitness coach who is 13 years removed from a spinal fusion due to scoliosis. So with that, I introduce Helena Sly. Helena, how you
Hi, how
doing?
are you doing? I'm good, I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So what does your business entail? What is a lifestyle and physique coach? Is it like workout programs, diet? What do you do?
Yeah, so I have an app that my clients can use, which gives them their training program. So they will have personalized training programs from me, and that app shows them like a little video of every exercise, and they're able to track their progress. So the training side is very much run that way. And I also provide nutrition coaching, and we work a lot on, building a lifestyle that feels good for these things so that the results can be maintainable. So they've got their training, they've got their nutrition program, we work on their lifestyle and break down like their daily habits and really focus on, what are the grounding habits that help make all of those things go a little bit better. Is that, before you go to bed, you're setting things up for the next day? Is that pre-planning your meals? Is that doing some journaling? So we work out what kind of habits really support those things. And yeah, with a big focus on making it feel good so that they can do it long term rather than it feeling like a punish or something that they have to do, but in making it enjoyable and really empowering them through that process with a lot of mindset work as well.
Okay, so it's almost kind of like a life coach as well. Like there's a lot of things outside of fitness too that you're getting
Yeah.
in. So are
Yeah,
you,
I would say
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Go ahead.
that's okay. I'd say a lot of my job is less to do with the training and nutrition program. And while I'm confident I write great training and nutrition programs, so much of my job is about like behavioral psychology and the ways that we actually apply ourselves to the way that we eat and the way that we train and getting those things done, because anyone can pick up a training or nutrition program, or you can even ask ChatGPT these days to write you a program. But if you're actually going to do it, you really need to work on the mindsets around why we do things and why we don't do things that we know align with our goals.
Okay. And your job, are you getting girls ready for stage like kind of what you're doing? Are they doing physique contests or is it just anybody?
So I have a couple of clients who are in the physique contest sort of arena. So I have some bodybuilding clients. I also have some athletes of different sports. So I've got a few ice skaters on my team, professional figure skaters. And then I've got some general population people that just want to lose that 5 to 10 kilos, just want to feel better in their bodies again. Some mums getting their new pre-baby body back, or whatever that's going to be for them now. I've had some wedding transformations. So I have quite a broad range of clients, but I tend to attract like the high achievers who are really sort of stuck in that sort of perfectionist all or nothing mentality, and helping try and break that to have less all or nothing and more just good consistency. And they can be in any sort of aspect of life really, but in the end of the day, that's who I tend to attract, because I guess that's what image I give out online.
Well, good. It sounds like you're helping a lot of people and it looks like you're just killing it on social media. So I am going to put your link in the bio so everybody can get to your IG. Do you have a YouTube or any other social media that I can link there?
I also do have my own podcast, which I started towards the end of last year, but mostly it's Instagram. I do have a Facebook page, but it kind of just gets the overdraft of what's gone on an Instagram, and I'm not as active in there.
Mhm.
I have a YouTube channel, but it's not necessarily something that people want to go watch. That's basically to host all of my training videos that I use in my app. So there's all these videos of me doing exercises, but I'm not like talking to the camera or anything like that. So Instagram is basically where it's at.
Okay. And are you competing right now? Are you on stage?
No, so I'm in a long off season. My plan is to probably compete again towards the end of 2025. And that gives me enough time to spend some time just enjoying training and nutrition for how that feels good for life, not just always being in competition mode. And also gives me time to build the muscle that I need to build to make sure that the next time I gotta get on stage, I look different to the last time. So if we're doing back-to-back shows, you don't necessarily have enough time to make real progress, because essentially how different you look on stage has less to do with that prep, that cut period where we're dieting, and more to do with the time you spend in the off season at a healthy body weight building muscle.
Gotcha. Okay. So you are what, 13, 14 years now removed from a spinal fusion?
Yeah. So I had it done when I was 19 years old, and I would say it was a really successful surgery for me. I don't think I could be doing the things that I do now if I'd decided not to have that operation.
And that's from scoliosis?
Yeah, so I had an S curve, so about 50 and 52 degrees, I think the two curvatures were, and I also had a rotation in the thoracic. And so before surgery, I had a lot of discomfort. I was in chronic pain. I had a lot of muscle spasming, and I was also my rib cage was twisted, so I wasn't able to use my full lung capacity anymore. It was to the point where sort of organs and things are starting to not have the space that they needed. And it was a decision made sort of with my future in mind that if I ever was going to fall pregnant, that there would be space for baby, and also obviously to try and get me out of the chronic pain that I was living in. And like I said, it was really successful for me.
Good. So how long were you living in pain?
I got diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 14. And we originally tried to brace me through my teens to try and avoid needing the surgery. So I wore a brace for 20 hours a day for 4 years, and that unfortunately wasn't successful. So that was hard. Obviously, like being a teenager wearing a full torso spinal brace, other than the fact that that was very uncomfortable and sore, it also was a little bit isolating as a teenager. I couldn't just sort of run around on the field at lunchtime the same as everybody else. When it was PE class, I got to take it off, or when I was dancing, because I was a dancer at the time, I got to take it off for those things. But I'd have to get it back on, and I actually needed somebody to help me put it back on to make sure it was tight enough. So there'd be like two or three girls in the change room with me trying to like get this brace back on tight enough. And like people used to walk past and like instead of just saying hey, like they'd kind of knock on my brace and they'd tap on it, and because it was obviously this hard thing, and I was stuck with this obscenely perfect posture in class where everybody else is slouching over their desk and I'm sitting there straight up like a rod because I had this brace on. And it was really uncomfortable, and it was not a good time, and unfortunately it didn't work in the way that we wanted it to, and my scoliosis did still progress to the point where I needed the surgery.
Okay. So you get to 19 and you decide now it's time for the fusion.
Yeah. And so I'd stopped bracing at around 18, and it got like rapidly worse after the bracing, and I was in so much pain. And we were talking to obviously my surgeon who I'd been seeing throughout the years on my journey with bracing, and he'd sort of said, you know, this doesn't need to be done now. You could do this later in your 20s or 30s once it gets to a point that you do like really need it. But obviously at 19, I still lived at home with my mum. I could take time off, work to recover. I could have like be living in the environment where I can be supported through that recovery. Whereas if I waited until I was in my mid 20s or 30s, other than the fact that it would have been an even bigger operation because it would have been worse, I also wouldn't necessarily have had the lifestyle to make that recovery that little bit easier by living at home with my mum. So, yeah, we just decided it was the way to go, and yeah, it was the right decision.
Hmm. I bet it didn't seem like the right decision right after surgery, did it?
Oh, there was definite wonder about what I would be able to do again. I was a dancer at the time, and I was also doing karate, and getting back into those was very slow. Obviously, it starts right back from in the hospital where I, kind of had to learn to walk again, and then to the point where when I did start going back to dance classes or karate classes, I just stood back in the back row and did very little versions of the movements to try and recalibrate where my center of mass was, and that sort of proprioceptive awareness that if I stuck both my arms out to the side, I had like one way up higher than the other, because what used to feel straight didn't feel straight anymore. And so I had to kind of relearn where my body was in space as part of that recovery. And I think it was about 3 months before I was allowed to sort of jump or do anything sort of with any sort of sharp movements. But in saying that, while it felt really slow at the time and I felt very limited and I was still in a fair amount of pain while I was initially recovering, by the time I was a year post-surgery, I was back on stage again with dancing. I think at the time of the operation, I'd set a goal to try and do one dance at the end of year concert. I ended up doing 13. And I was back in the tournament circuit with karate, I think just before a year out from my surgery as well. And while once I got to a year, I'm like, wow, that recovery was actually quite fast. But along the way, it felt so slow and I felt so limited. And I was used to being good at things and I felt like I had to just do regression versions of everything. But it absolutely, like, by the time you get to a year, that time actually flies by and I was out of pain and I was able to do most things at that point. And I would definitely say now at this point, it barely limits me at all.
Yeah, so that's kind of the same for me. And after a year, I could do most of the things I could do prior to the surgery. But then, I mean, when I got to 2 years and now at 3 years, things felt so much better. And I remember doing a video at 1 year and I'm like, guys, I'm like 85, 90%. And then I get to 2 years and I'm like, no, I wasn't. I was at like 65, 70. Now I'm at 85, 90. But
Yeah.
it's truly amazing that in a year you were back already dancing. Now, does that dancing require you to jump around in like dynamic movements?
Yeah, so I had to be able to jump, and that's fine, like do leaps across the stage and things like that, and I could do those things. Where some of the dances had to be modified a little bit was just anything that really required spinal flexion or contraction because I am fused at the end of the day. So I can't arch my back or round my back forward. And so there was a couple of movements where something had been put into the choreography that I just couldn't do because I couldn't make that shape with my torso. And so they would either create an A and B group where half the people on stage do one thing and half do the other, or they just slightly change it. So there was a couple of little modifications, but that's literally just down to me being able to arch my back or round it depending on the movement. Or if we're flat on the floor on your back kind of thing and you have to sort of roll up, I can't do that. It's like I can't do crunch type movements, but that's not because of pain. That's just because I've got rods in my spine. So yeah, small adjustments, but overall, like no one watching the performance would have been able to tell that anything was different.
Awesome. And when you say you're like you were off when you lifted your arms and everything, that's like you're trying to fit back into a new body. So what was your routine to get to find like your equilibrium? Was it a lot of stretching or what were you doing?
I basically just started back real slow, like I said earlier, sort of standing in the back row of the class and just doing what I could, and I would be moving slower. And we talked to my surgeon about the fact that, like, would I need to do any specific rehabilitation? And he said, honestly, getting back into dancing because of the core work involved and things like that, he's like, that's probably the best thing that you could do. So I didn't actually have any specific rehab post up. It was just get back to dancing because there's so much work in sort of holding your core strong. And as far as working out where you are in space, like it's a great way to do it. So I didn't have specific rehab. I just went back to what I was doing and slowly work my way back up to doing it at a level like everybody else. But yeah, there was no real stretching or physio exercises involved.
Okay. And you're fused from the T2 down to the L2, right?
Yeah.
So that's like what, mid back to lower back?
It's quite up high, so you've got obviously your cervical spine in your neck, and then so it's two joints down from the top of your shoulders, and then I've got like three joints at the very bottom of my spine before you go into the sacrum. So I have quite limited movement. That's 12 vertebrae fused, and so that's for anybody who wouldn't needing it. It's like 15 inches of fusion.
So do you have issues? Obviously, like you can't round your back, right?
Yeah, I'm stuck with permanently perfect posture is probably the worst side effect.
So are you anything like adjacent segment disease with the discs that you do have coming out at all?
No, I've been quite lucky, and I would honestly say that the fact that I kept active is the biggest part of that. So whether it was my dancing, my karate, or in later years my weight training, I was always doing some work that supported my core strength, and having that core strength allows me to make sure that those joints are not compromised. And especially the weight training, learning to brace under a squat, learning to brace through a deadlift is some of the best work that you can do to support your spine. And while that was a very scary thing to start off in, because a lot of people who've had this kind of surgery or anybody who's lived through chronic back pain, if you're out of pain, the scariest thing is something that might trigger you to fall back in pain. And you hear all these stories about people hurting their back in a squat or in a deadlift, but that's obviously done with poor technique. And so I didn't rush into it when I did start weight training but I would credit my lack of back injuries to the fact that I've kept myself strong. Like the worst thing that you can do for a bad back is stay sedentary because then it's got no support. So my load doesn't go into my spine. My load goes into my core supporting musculature, from glutes through to core and everything else that supports the spine. So yeah, just keeping strong and active and learning how to brace under load has kept me pain free.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people need to hear because I feel like a lot of people get depressed after having surgery and they do sit around and they do lay around because they don't want to do anything and they don't feel like they can do anything. But staying active is the best thing for you. And what I would ask you is there anything you do to decompress your spine? Like, do you do dead hangs or, I mean, pull-ups probably works for you, but do you use an inversion table, anything like that?
No, I don't do anything like that, to be honest. And I'm not saying that's not something that people need to do or in different journeys, but like I said, I think the training that I do in general helps support the spine, and I don't need to do anything specific for it. And right at the very beginning, obviously, like that would have felt great doing a bit of decompression. And the very first month after surgery, I basically only got out of bed to go to the bathroom or shower or what have you. So that first month, I definitely was wondering like. Did I make the right choice? This is very limiting. I think it was a couple of months before I was allowed to drive because I needed to be able to turn around a little bit to be able to see blind spots and stuff like that. And so through all of that, it was hard, but essentially, yeah, as far as my initial core work coming back, like I got back into doing like planks and things like that. But that was generally part of a dance class or part of a karate class anyway. But yeah, no, I don't actually do any decompression work for myself.
That's good. That's good that you don't have to. I do the dead hangs. I had an inversion table before I had the surgery. I haven't gotten one since. And what turned me off to that was right before the surgery. So a little bit of backstory on me. So I had disc pain and I had bulging discs ever since I was late teens. And I was always able to fix it with an inversion table. And then toward the end, right before I had surgery, when I'd get on the inversion table, it would just fire these electric shocks up my leg to where I wish somebody would cut my leg off. It was so painful and like so debilitating that I don't even want one of those inversion tables around anymore. Like it really like turned me off to it, but it was a great tool before. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I would say while I still had scoliosis, something like that probably would have felt great. But like I said, the bracing kind of elongated my spine for me while I was pre-surgery for the most part. But yeah, if I could have hung off things, I'm probably sure it would have felt great. Anything to sort of lengthen that spine because it was so compressed. And I guess that's a little bit of the difference too about doing it for the scoliosis versus like bulging discs. I've never really had any actual disc issues, which I'm thankful for. So most of the pain that I dealt with pre-op was muscle spasms because my back was working so hard to try and keep me standing upright. Whereas if I just relaxed, I would have been really leaning over to one side. So one side of my back developed a lot more muscle than the other, and it was always in spasm, and that's where a lot of my pain actually came from.
okay. And you had your fusion at 19. So I had mine when I was 33. And so I can tell you, before the surgery, I was depressed. Like I did not want to do anything. I couldn't do anything. I could just lay there. And I had one night before the surgery where I was thinking like, I'm not going to be able to throw a football with my kids anymore. I cried almost all night, right? Like, and that was just like maybe a week before the surgery. And that kind of snapped me out of it. But once I had the surgery, I was positive from day one. Like, I'm like, I can get back. I know I can get back. I just needed a positive outcome from the surgery. So I'm curious with you being so young, like I know if I was 19 when I got it, I would have been way more emotional, irrational. Like I'm curious to hear how you dealt with like depression and your mental health during this time.
Yeah, I was less depressed about the surgery itself. I was definitely worried about what I'd be able to do and my identity as a dancer. That felt like it was something that I was going to potentially have to let go of, and that was hard at that age. But I was in so much pain beforehand that I was desperate for the surgery to go ahead. Being in chronic pain through my teens was definitely hard on my mental health. And also, in the brace, I felt quite different to other kids. I was not diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, but I got diagnosed recently. And so I already felt kind of different and didn't know why. And then I walk around with this like body brace on in chronic pain. And then also just the body image piece of knowing that I looked a bit different to other girls. Being a teen, you're already so self-critical as your body goes through changes. But my waist looked quite different on one side to the other. I had one side of my waist that had quite a sharp waist, and then the other side was straight up and down. My rib cage was narrow on one side and wide on the other side. And I also had a lean across to one side a little bit. And so I was always just trying to hide my body as a teen. And as far as like the normal body dysmorphia of being scared of getting fat or whatever else that is normal for, unfortunately, normal for teenage girls, I was also like, you know, watching my body change through puberty, watching my body change as it was deformed. And I kind of took on that word, was like, I have a deformity. And that made me feel, you know, very self-critical and really impacted my confidence. And so once I could have the surgery and I felt like I looked more quote unquote normal, that really helped with that side of it. And obviously getting myself out of chronic pain really helped with my mental health as well. And I had mental health struggles regardless from other areas. I was recently diagnosed with bipolar, and that makes a lot of my 20s make sense. But I always have had, I probably, even if it wasn't for my back, I would have had some struggles with mental health through my teens, but it was definitely hard. And I was not very nice to myself a lot of the time pre-op, and watching myself go through that recovery and get back on stage and get back to karate and seeing myself do things that I didn't believe that I could was actually really good for me and my mental health. So in that way, the surgery once again was a success, but I put a lot down to, I was determined as heck to live normally and not just be a victim to it. Because when I was looking for inspiration pre-op, I was looking for videos of the actual surgery because I'm a little bit weird like that and I wanted to see exactly what was going to go on. But I was also looking for people who had maybe vlogged about their experience. And to be honest, all I could find was people talking about like a negative view or their victim mindset. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I'm sure that this surgery has some positive outcomes. I'm sure that there's some people doing some amazing things. And I found a couple of little things, but there wasn't many people talking about a good life post-op. And that made it hard to feel like I was making the right decision. But I had a little determination inside of me to be like, well, maybe I can do it a little bit different. And maybe I can be the inspiration for somebody else later on. And so I'm so glad that you've invited me on here, and the fact that you're running this podcast to be able to give positive stories to people who are maybe going to have to undergo this surgery, because there just wasn't much, and there was so much victim like mindset around everybody's experience. I'm like, nah, it doesn't need to be that way. Like, this is actually pretty cool that you can go through something like this and live normally or beyond normally afterwards.
Yeah, and that's why I do this, is because for the exact same reason. I couldn't find anything on YouTube that wasn't negative. Everything was negative. Everything I researched was negative. Oh, you'll never be able to work out, never be able to play basketball, never, like everything, anything you research. No, don't do it. It's basically get the surgery and then just hang out for the rest of your life until you die. And I was like, no, I need to do like an in the moment real video. And if you watch my first video, it's like 25 minutes long. It's stupid. It's me rambling. And it's the video of mine that has the most like views, like it's over 100,000 views. And I never, ever dreamed it would be anything like that. And I
Wow.
get emails and comments and stuff about how it's helped people. And it's, yeah, that's why we're doing this, because people need to hear you're 13 plus years after a fusion. You're doing fine. You're doing all kinds of activities. You're running your own business. Like, these are things people need to see, because people go into this deep depression and they just never get out of it. People get on these pain pills. They never get, it just completely ruins people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. And some people do obviously still have a lot of pain post-surgery. Not everybody's surgery is successful of mine, so I definitely wouldn't want to like victim blame people who are still struggling afterwards. But I do see a lot of people just sort of using it as their excuse or a bit of a crutch. I can't do that because I have a bad back. I can't do that because I've had a spinal fusion, especially when it comes to weight training, which I'm so passionate about it being one of the best things that you can do. And I'd said earlier, like I was pretty scared when I first started, but I also just had this thing. I was like, if I can get everything around my spine strong, there's not as much load on my spine when I just bend down to pick up the remote off the coffee table and put my back out or whatever. Because that's where a lot of these back injuries happen, is just doing basic stuff around the house. But if you can deadlift your own body weight, or you can squat with your own body weight on your back, you can do all those things so much easier and out of pain, and it really does help take load away from your spine when the musculature surrounding it is strong. But 100% there needs to be more good stories, and I share it on my Instagram every now and then. I used to more than I do now, because honestly sometimes I completely forget that it's a thing for me. Like it's so well recovered that I forget about it until somebody mentions my scar, or until like something prompts me to be like, oh, I should probably mention that again, because I haven't for a while. But whenever I share on my scoliosis surgery, there is so many people kind of like yourself that message through and say, thank you so much for sharing a positive experience post-op. Or people who have maybe daughters who are about to go and have the surgery often reach out to me and are asking, can you give me some positive message to be able to give to my daughter, because she's about to go undergo this surgery and she's really scared, and I've showed her your page and all the things that you're doing, and she's really inspired by it. And I think I should share on it more often, because there are quite a large portion of my followers who have jumped onto my page because of the fact that I've shared about it on occasion. And I've got one post that I shared recently talking about, the type of squat that I hoped to be able to do post-surgery. It's maybe like a goblet squat, holding a kettlebell or a dumbbell in front of me and being able to squat with that. But the type of squat I truly can do post-surgery is with my body weight or more on my back with a barbell, full depth, no limitation. And while I had the goal to be able to do the smaller version or the regressed version, I also didn't let that goal be limiting to me, and I just let myself try things, and slowly I built that strength, and I've absolutely surpassed all the goals that I thought I would have for myself pre-op. That's also, like, as a dancer, like I said before, I did all those dances at the end of year concert. As a karateka, I achieved my black belt and right up to my second dan in karate post-op. I think I was a brown belt when I went into my surgery. So I got my black belt. I competed as an international karateka over in the UK and in Japan, and I wasn't limited. And I've obviously competed in bodybuilding shows now. It's like there is nothing that I have been able to, like, nothing that I've gone to do that I was limited by, unless I need to lie on the ground and do crunches, because that's basically the only thing I can't do. And if people have seen me and my training, I still have I still can get a six-pack provided I'm lean enough. You don't have to do crunches to be able to strengthen your core that way, but being able to brace under heavy load and any sort of other movements that are going to brace your core can still develop that muscular too. So like, people don't need to have, a view of what you can't do just because you can't do crunches in regards to like achieving your dream body as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just need to change how you work out, and it's amazing what you can achieve with like the building blocks method. With me, after the spinal fusion, it was just, you don't know you can do something until you do it for the first time. And you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Oh, that wasn't that bad. Maybe I can do this. I mean, sometimes you have to lay in bed for the whole next day because you're so sore because you're just using these muscles again. But yeah, it's amazing that you were back competing after this, and your entire story is amazing, and it's what people need to hear. Because although I do get some positive feedback, I get people that are so negative, and they blame everything either on the surgery, on their doctor, on the things they can't do. I get trolls all the time telling me you're so stupid for getting a fusion. I mean, you've been on social media, right? I mean, you get it, but people just need to hear the positive message. And I'm so glad to have you on for that. One thing I did want to ask you about was your scar. Is it like to the point where it's barely noticeable?
Yeah, and you know what? I actually miss it being more visible. So it was obviously quite red and pinky purpley for the first like couple of years, but now a lot of the time it's not that visible except for in certain lighting. But some on occasion when I'm training, because I film my workouts pretty much every day and put them into my stories. On occasion it's from a back angle and the lighting catches it, and I might have somebody ask about it. But I love if somebody notices it and says, "Oh my gosh, what's that scar from?" And I obviously get that a lot less now because it's actually healed really beautifully. It's barely visible, which was what I felt like I wanted at the beginning when it was really visible, and I was a little bit shy or a little bit like concerned with how it was going to look because I was so conscious. But now I'm like, oh gosh, I actually wish it was more visible because I'm so proud of that scar and what that represents for me and what part of my story that tells, that I kind of wish it was a little pinker, to be honest.
That's awesome. It's you wear it like a badge of honor, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so is there anything that you can tell like has definitely changed in your personality after the surgery? And let me give you an example. Like for me, I wouldn't have done this before the surgery, like little insecurities, caring about what people say about me, that type of stuff. All that stuff for me is completely gone. Like I could give a crap what you say about me. Like it's almost like my life is, I have one life before the surgery, one life after. Like you figure out what really matters and all the other crap, you just push it to the side. Was there anything like that with you?
Yeah, I definitely think it really helped on the confidence piece, not only because I then looked better than pre-op, but also in going like, look what I've done, you know? And so little by little, as I healed from surgery, I definitely had a lot more confidence in who I was as a person and what kind of determination and grit I have just by taking that little by little approach, because little by little, a little makes a lot. But I also got a lot out of being able to go like, oh, I can inspire others with this. And I was debilitatingly shy pre-op. And having a story that I could tell or knowing that I could do something that would inspire others really helped with my confidence and helped pull me out of that shyness. And I was also a lot kinder to myself on the body image piece. Now, like getting stronger and seeing myself be able to do things that I couldn't do before made me so appreciative of what my body can do that it made it feel silly to be so like self-deprecating or to be unkind to myself about how my body looked, when I'm like, but look what it has done. Look
Yeah.
what I can do with this body. It feels so silly to be like self-conscious about how your legs look when you realize that your body has gone through a journey like this. And, you know, at one point you were bedbound for a month. At one point you had all of your spine and ribs all broken up and put back together. It feels so silly to be self-conscious about being a couple of kilos heavier than you want to be when you like, but look what the heck my body can do. And that really comes down to like, or brings in my why when it comes to training. I always want to be able, and I will always want to be, you know, as independent as possible as I get older. And I know that if I let myself go and I stop training and I stop trying to prioritize that lifestyle, I am in a position where my bottom three joints will start taking all the load. And there's a very real possibility that if I lived a sedentary lifestyle that I could end up in a wheelchair later on, because those bottom joints, once they go, like they take all the load. And so I'm like, I want to be able forever. And, you know, I don't need to be so self-conscious about what it looks like because look what it can do. And I think that was a big part of it.
Is that when you fell in love with fitness and weight training? Was it like thinking about your future, or why did you decide to start this business? You know, I know you just explained you want to keep those joints, you want to keep the muscles around nice and strong to protect those joints. But is that the reason where you said, I'm going to start weight training like crazy, or what sparked this?
So the weight training was something that I'd always liked the idea of, but sort of hadn't really just worked out how to incorporate that into my life. But my reason for starting weight training was actually because I was getting ready for one of my black belt gradings, and I wanted to get stronger, and I couldn't really find a coach who specialized in karate with weight training, and I didn't want to just go and weight train and get strong in ways that weren't going to help my karate. And so because I felt like there was a little bit of a gap in the market, that's actually what made me go and do my own training for that. And then along the way, while I was weight training and improving my karate, when I was at the gym, quite a few times I had people asking me what show I was prepping for, because I was gaining muscle and they were assuming I was a bikini or a fitness competitor. And after I'd had a few different people mention that to me, that kind of sparked the idea that if people think I'm doing this, then maybe I've got the goods to be able to do this. And then I ended up pursuing that journey. The coach that I had at the time, he did prep people for stage. And so I spoke to him about it and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And so I kind of morphed over the next couple of years away from karate and into bodybuilding. And that was just sort of like this changing journey. And now I love the bodybuilding piece. I love weight training. I love what that does for people. Even so, my mum is one of my clients. She's been my client now for 5 years. She was like my test dummy to start with, but she started weight training at 58 years old. She's now 63 and she's the strongest she's ever been in her life. Once again, like most 60-year-olds are living with back pain. She has arthritis, hips, knees, ankles, but with weight training, she's been able to reduce a lot of her arthritic pain and improve her ability to move around. She can get up off the floor without her hands, all these sorts of things that start to deteriorate while you're getting older. And I think my passion for being able to move independently as I get older rubbed off on her. And when you compare her to any of her siblings, like she's so much more able. And as her daughter, it's really nice to see her really confident and moving really well, and know that if she does have a fall, she's a lot less risk of hurting herself, which becomes a thing through 60s and 70s. And so I've been able to help other people take on the mindset of training for your ability as you age, rather than just training for aesthetics, because it can be kind of hard to go. The only reason why you want to go and train is because you want to change how you look. But if you have a deeper why of wanting to be able to sustain good movement and independence, just to be able to get yourself on and off the toilet, that's why a lot of people end up going into aged care, because they don't have enough strength to lift themselves up against gravity. But if you're weight training, you can avoid that and you can maintain your independence a lot longer. And so, yeah, I'm quite passionate about moving well as you age, and weight training has really done that for me.
Gotcha. And tell me about the podcast. Is it based on fitness or?
Yeah, so it's fairly new, so I only started it in December, but it's
Mhm.
called Not Just Health and Fitness. So there's a health and fitness theme to it, but I also want to talk, not just about training and nutrition, but the mindset pieces and the lifestyle pieces and things that I'm learning. I plan to at some point share on my scoliosis journey. I talk about mental health quite a lot because I'm quite an advocate for better conversations around mental health. And so I share my journey on that as well. And recently I just did a little series of like affirmations for people. You can listen to it as far as improving body image, or there was another one like on financial health, or just on like having a good day. And so I'd done some affirmation series recently. And yesterday I did an interview with a a fellow coach who specializes in body image and relationship with food. And so, yeah, it's called Not Just Health and Fitness, and I'm really excited to see it grow this year. It's something that I had a lot of imposter syndrome starting, and I'm sure you're the same when you started yours, like, who's going to listen to this? But at the end of the day, I'm like, people listen to me talk on my stories every day. Why not give them some like longer form pieces that they can listen to, or things that I can refer my clients to, rather than telling them the same thing over and over again, like, oh, I've spoken about this on one of my podcasts episodes, listen to that, and that should be able to help X part of your journey, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I have a little bit of that imposter syndrome, but for me, it's like, I know I'm not going to make millions off YouTube podcasting, right? But people are going to be helped by this. And I know they are because they send me messages. So I actually enjoy talking to you. I enjoy hearing people's journeys and sharing that with other people. So yeah, I think part of it is just knowing who I am, like, this is the reason I'm doing it, and I know I'm super amateur and I don't care. So it just is what it is. So where can we find your podcast?
So it's actually on all major platforms, on Apple and Spotify, etc. On my Instagram, I have a link to it,
Mhm.
which is usually how most people find it, or I mention it in my stories when I post a new one. But yeah, on all major platforms, it's just called Not Just Health and Fitness.
Awesome. Do you have guests or is it just you?
So most of my episodes so far have been just myself, but I have 2 episodes with guests. One of them I just recorded yesterday, and so that'll actually be going uploaded tonight. And I do plan on doing more guest episodes along the way, interviewing some of my clients about that journey, so people have like a real person's journey, because they look at me and they go, yeah, but you're a bodybuilder, yeah, but you work in this, you work in that space, you have that privilege. But when I can share a journey of somebody who's just like your average Jane and she just wanted to lose that 5 or 6 kilos, and what that journey has been like, I think those sorts of interviews can be really helpful for people. So I want to be able to share some like real life stories along the way, as well as being quite real and raw about the things that I struggle with on my journey, because I got this drive from the point where so many people see somebody else who has achieved what they want to achieve, and they almost put them up on a pedestal and think, they don't have the same problems that I do, they don't have the same struggles that I do, and that's why they've been able to achieve that. But if I can show that, like, hey, I actually have these major struggles with mental health, or hey, I've had to recover from this major operation, or whatever else might come up in my life that makes it hard to do the thing. If somebody else has that same problem and they can see that I've done it anyway, that gives them hope that they can too. And so a lot of my drive for what I share on Instagram and what I share in my podcast is, once again, just like you, is wanting to be able to help people. I don't care if I end up with an enormous following or not. That really doesn't matter to me. But the messages I get when I share something a bit real and raw about people saying thank you, that's been able to help me have a better discussion with somebody else in my family, or thank you, that's given me hope that I can too. I'm like, that is what it's all worth, because there's definitely going to be people who don't receive what I do positively. That is just part of life. And to be honest, I'm really quite lucky. I have beautiful following, and I've been very lucky with the community that I've created, that I have a lot of support. But there's going to be some people who are put off by it, or think, why is she starting a podcast? Who is she to do that? I don't care, because if as soon as I get a message from somebody to say that something has helped them, I'm like, I don't mind if only 5 people see that. Yep. Because one of them was helped by it. And if it does happen to go out to hundreds or thousands of people, amazing. But I want to be able to make an impact to someone is the main thing.
Yeah. And you know what? I put my email address in my YouTube comments when people ask, and they email me, and I've had people ask for my phone number. I've taken calls with people bawling, crying, saying they're going to kill themselves, saying I helped them from killing themselves. So that right there is worth it. I mean, these people, they just want to talk to somebody else that's felt the same pain that they felt, or can help them through. A lot of people need to see a path. They need to have a guide, because they can't figure it out themselves, or they don't want to figure it out themselves. So yeah, I mean, if you email me, I answer your emails. I spend a lot of time on this. I spend way more time on this than money I make, put it that way. So yeah, that's what it's about for me. And it definitely sounds like that's what it's about for you as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, my inbox is on Instagram is where most people reach out to me. And yeah, definitely there's, especially when I share real and raw about the mental health sides of things, there are people just so grateful. And it's not just a quick message to be like, oh, hey, like, thanks for sharing that. That really helped. Like, people will send me paragraphs about how it's impacted them. And then, I try not to take that on as a responsibility, because that can be too much. But also, like, being able to just go, like, while it's not my responsibility to help people, it is my drive to help people. And as long as that's where my content is coming from, it's a desire to help and not just a desire to get a bunch of followers. Because like I could get a whole lot of followers if I just did more shoots in my bikini, and if I shared more karate stuff. That following part is huge. But when I'm just trying to help people on their journey, it's not going to reach as many people, but I think it's going to be more effective to the people that it can reach.
Yep, you're 100% right. And tell me about the ADHD. Is that something that kind of helps you lock in for your podcast and like really meticulous about the details for like working out, or is it something that doesn't really help that?
So I had a bit of it comes from both sides, really. I think there's a lot of pros to an ADHD brain that once I got diagnosed, was able to see. So when I wasn't diagnosed, I was quite self-judgmental about, why can't I just do these things, these little things that other people can do so easily? Like, I knew I was intelligent, but I just felt like I couldn't apply myself to do my homework or to get assignments turned in on time and things like that. But I also really realized, once being diagnosed and learning more about ADHD, is that if I'm actually interested in something, I have an ability to hyper-focus on that to a level that a neurotypical brain can't. And my whole business and the way I run my business is very ADHD friendly. And also, I have capacity to change things that I want to, depending on what's interesting to me most of the time or what's inspiring me most of the time. And so working for myself has actually been really positive since getting my diagnosis, because I did always struggle in other job roles when I was just being told, this is the way we do it because that's the way it's done. I'm like, but my creative brain was like, but we could do it this other way and it'd be more efficient, or we could do it this other way and it's going to work better. And I really struggled to just do things the way that they're supposed to do, because that's the way they've been done. And I didn't really realize why I had such an aversion to want to just do things that way. But once I got diagnosed, once again, I really understood it. And it definitely helps with creativity. It helps me like think outside the box. It helps me come up with different sorts of solutions for my clients. It helps me just I guess, have the like, how hard can it be kind of thought when it comes to starting a podcast or starting your own business. I'm like, well, if I'm passionate about it, I'm going to make it work because that's the way my brain works. And so there's a lot of benefits to ADHD. I am medicated for it, and that helps with the focus as well. But yeah, I actually really love the way that my brain helps me run my business.
Good. Yeah, I figured it was going to be that way too. So I want to wrap up with you, but there was a question I had to ask you. So I seen on your story that you were eating kangaroo meat. So is that something, is that like a delicacy, or is that something that's mass produced?
It is mass produced. It's not super common, as in, like, not every household in Australia is going to be eating kangaroo. A lot of the fitness community do because it's such a lean source of meat. So it's more common through the bodybuilders, but it's a slightly cheaper source of meat than, say, beef, and it's also like a little bit more ethically farmed. But mostly I just eat it because I think it's tasty and because it's a really lean source of meat. And yeah, I really enjoy it actually. But if you ever come to Oz, like, give it a try. It's a little bit, it's a game meat, so it does have that sort of gamey flavor. But I generally have it in like kangaroo burgers or, you know, in a marinated kangaroo steak or something like that. But yeah, it's not super common. It's probably not as common as most people would think, unless you're in the fitness community.
Gotcha. Okay. So it'd be kind of like bison or something over here in the States. It's kind of
Yeah.
it is mass produced, but it's not, there's not like farms for it. Like there's not kangaroo farms, is there?
I don't think so. No. In some areas they're considered pests because they're
Mhm.
so overrun. So like in some ways, like they are able to remove them but still obviously use them rather than just culling for the sake of culling. But I don't think there's kangaroo farms, no.
Okay. Enough about Australia. So I think you are a huge inspiration. And when I go on Instagram and I type in like spinal fusion, usually the women I see is scoliosis. And a lot of times it's young girls on there. And I think them finding your content, whether it's through this, whether they find it on Instagram, I think that's going to be a plus for them. So really, I had a great time. I'm glad you could find the time to come on. I know we got a 16-hour difference. So thank you for finding the time. I know you're super busy, but I really appreciate it, Helena.
No, I appreciate you having me, and thank you for saying, you know, such kind words, because I really do. It's that young girl that I was before surgery. That's the person that I want to be able to inspire.
Well, good. Hopefully this gets your message out there, and we'll wrap up with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.